Welcome back to another video with your professor, Professor Fiske. I am teaching you, we're doing programming in C, and in this specific micro lecture, we're going to discuss unions. So, what is a union? Well, a union is a struct, right? So, why do they exist then if they're a struct? Well, what a union is, in all of its glory, is a struct where only one of the properties or one of the members can contain data and can be accessed at one time. Now, the idea of a union is that maybe in certain situations the data that you need is not necessarily as um, is not formatted in a way where the data is holistic across the board. There might be a situation in the data in a union where one or more of these data set or data properties, these union properties, doesn't need a value, or the value would not be filled if the other value was filled. I don't necessarily have a good example of this. Maybe in the event of the idea that you had a union that was tracking servers, but only one server was active and all the others were passive. And in that specific situation, only the active server's property would be filled with a value, and the passive server properties would not be filled with a value at all. So you would just look at the union and say, oh, well, server 3 is active, servers 1, 2, and 4 are not. And so that's the one that we need to go look at for whatever reason. Well, with that being said, if I change this to a union, obviously things will start to break, so let's go ahead and fix that. But if I change this to a union, you will notice automatically that I cannot initialize more than one element or more than one data element with values. I can only initialize one with a value. If I try to do this, there's a good chance this is going to blow up, and there you go. It blew up like nobody's business because it took the first value of John and it applied it to each of these properties. And once it came back, it said, well, they're all John, buddy, so there's not anything you can do about this. So when you have a union, it's very important that you understand, and you're probably asking, well, where does the 1 billion or whatever this is, where does this number come from? That is that is it's an int or integer type representation of the characters JOHN and every subsequent array position after that, because guess what? John is not just 4 characters in an array, it's 50. It's 50. So 4 of these characters are being housed with data, and the other 46 specific character positions in this array don't have data. That doesn't mean that those character positions are not occupying a storage location which has space associated with it. Please understand that it is. So whenever you do this, and this is why I don't like this, whenever you do this, it's very important that you understand and you care for the data and the memory at a very efficient micro level, or you will run into issues where you're going to ask yourself, why is so much information or why is so much data being housed or being used when I just have the letters J, O, H, and N in that location? You don't. You have 46 other positions that have been relegated, if you will, that have been captured to store data later. So I don't want to go too far into this because unions are structs. You just can only store one. You can only initialize one property at a time. And if you try to initialize them all, what will essentially happen is you'll get exactly what happened here. And notice it didn't error out. It didn't go, you can't do that. No, it just said, okay, well, John, big effing number, big effing number. All right. But otherwise, unions work the same way as structures. The only difference is that unions can only initialize one element at a time, ever. And there's not a whole lot of situations where that is pertinent, in my opinion. I think this is old. This is an old example or an old way of doing things, if you will. So either way, long story short, what are the differences between structures and unions? Well, they both use user-defined data types to store data. It's just that there's different types, as you know, there's different ways of storing that data. Whereas a structure can store multiple data points at one time, a union can only store one. Their members are an object. So if you go into C or C#, C++, Java, and the like, they use objects, and objects are the little sister to the big sister structures, right? Structures came first. Just like if you ask yourself when you use arrays in C# and Java and C++, well, what kind of arrays came first? Well, jagged arrays came first. Just give you some context. You can pass a structure by value, which is what we prefer. Passing by definition or reference is not preferred. You can use size of operators on each one of your structs and unions to understand, what the size of those specific locations are, so you know what's being used and what's not being used. You can pass the value of a structure and a union in a function. That is totally allowed. And then the dot operator, or right here, the dot operator is what we normally use to determine, this is the object and this is the property of the object which I want to pull. This is almost the same as when you have an array and you say array, or say, if your array is named vehicles and you said I want 1. Notice that the number 1 here is a key. First name is also a key. The difference is first name means something to us humans and the number 1 means nothing to us. If you stored a Chevy Silverado string here in the first position, 1 has no correlation whatsoever to that specific value. Whereas in this case, first name is relative to the domain we're developing for and thus does have value in the key value pair with the value of John that we're passing using the struct. So it's very important that when you use your objects like structs, it's important that you understand that this is far more impactful to us as humans than it is to the computer itself. Arrays are far more efficient to the actual PC, but not by a big factor. Please like and subscribe. I really enjoy doing these videos and help me understand what I need to do next. Otherwise, as I say in all my videos, good luck, have fun, ciao.